My uncle raised me after my parents died, but treated me like garbage. Years later, he tried to ruin my business and I fought back. Now my whole family is in chaos. I, 29M, never had a great relationship with my uncle Frank, 52M. Our story goes back further than I can remember, but the tension between us has always been palpable. Growing up, he always treated me differently from my cousins. I was the black sheep of the family, even though I did well in school and stayed out of trouble. My parents, Sarah and James, were free spirits. They met at a music festival in the 90s and spent their early years together traveling the world. When I came along, they settled down in a small coastal town, but they never lost their adventurous spirit. We'd often go on impromptu camping trips or spend weekends exploring hidden beaches. Their love for life was infectious, and those early years were filled with laughter and warmth. Frank, my mom's older brother, was the complete opposite. He was all about structure, success, and keeping up appearances. He never approved of my parents' lifestyle, often making snide comments about their lack of ambition at family gatherings. I remember overhearing heated arguments between him and my mom, with Frank insisting they needed to grow up and my mom defending their choices. Everything changed when I was 10. My parents decided to take a weekend trip to celebrate their anniversary. They never made it to their destination. A drunk driver crossed the median, causing a head-on collision. Just like that, my world shattered. With no other close relatives, I went to live with my Aunt Sarah, 48F, and Uncle Frank. From day one, Frank made it clear he didn't want me there. He'd constantly criticize everything I did, from my grades to my hobbies. Nothing was ever good enough for him. Meanwhile, he doted on his own kids and gave them whatever they wanted. I tried so hard to fit in, to be the perfect nephew he wanted. I joined the debate team because Frank valued articulation. I took up golf because it was his favorite sport. I even started dressing differently, swapping my favorite band t-shirts for collared polos. But no matter what I did, I was always falling short in his eyes. The Christmas when I was 14 stands out vividly in my memory. Frank got my cousins, Lisa, then 16, and Michael, then 12, new gaming consoles and smartphones. They were ecstatic, hugging Frank and talking excitedly about all the games they'd play. When it came to my turn, I tried to temper my expectations. My gift? A pack of socks and some school supplies. The stark contrast was impossible to ignore. When I tried to hide my disappointment, Frank berated me for being ungrateful. "This is why your parents could never provide for you properly," he sneered. "You don't appreciate the value of practical things." That was the moment I realized I'd never be part of their family, no matter how hard I tried. High school was a blur of keeping my head down and counting the days until I could leave. I threw myself into my studies, not because I cared about Frank's approval anymore, but because I saw education as my ticket out. I joined every club and extracurricular I could, partly to pad my college applications, but mostly to stay away from home as much as possible. The one bright spot during those years was my cousin Emily, 27F. 2 years younger than me, she was the only one who seemed to see through Frank's facade. She'd often sneak me snacks when Frank decided I didn't deserve dinner for some perceived slight. On particularly bad days, she'd leave encouraging notes in my backpack. Without her, I'm not sure I would have made it through those years with my sanity intact. As soon as I turned 18, I moved out and put myself through college with scholarships and part-time jobs. I worked as a barista, a tutor, a campus tour guide, anything to make ends meet without having to ask Frank for help. I cut contact with Frank and barely spoke to the rest of the family. The only one I stayed close to was Emily, who always stood up for me growing up. College was a revelation. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. I made real friends, joined clubs because I was genuinely interested in them, and even started dating. It was like I could finally breathe after years of suffocating under Frank's oppressive expectations. In my junior year, I took an entrepreneurship class that changed everything. The professor, Dr. Martinez, saw potential in me that I hadn't recognized in myself. She encouraged me to pursue my ideas and introduced me to like-minded students. By senior year, I had started working on a tech project with 2 classmates, Raj and Zoe. After graduation, we decided to turn our project into a full-fledged company. We struggled at first, working out of Raj's garage and subsisting on ramen and coffee. There were nights I lay awake, wondering if we were deluding ourselves. But slowly, things started to come together. We got our first investor, then our first major client. Before I knew it, we had an actual office and a growing team. I thought I'd finally escaped Frank's shadow and built something for myself. Our company was gaining recognition in the industry, and I felt proud of what we'd accomplished. For once, my future looked bright, and it was entirely of my own making. Last month, out of the blue, Frank called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. He said he wanted to invest in my company and become a partner. I was shocked. This was the first time he'd shown any interest in my life in over a decade. At first, I thought maybe he was trying to make amends, that he'd finally recognized my worth. But as he talked, it became clear he was more interested in the potential profits than in reconnecting with me. I politely declined, saying we weren't looking for outside investors. Frank didn't take the rejection well. He started ranting about how I owed him for raising me and how I'd be nothing without him. The familiar feeling of inadequacy started creeping in, but I pushed it down. I hung up and blocked his number. I thought that would be the end of it. A week later, I started getting calls from some of our biggest clients canceling contracts. When I asked why, they all gave vague answers about hearing concerning things about our company's practices. I couldn't figure out what was going on until Emily called me in tears. She said Frank had been contacting all our clients and partners, telling them lies about how we cut corners, used shady accounting, and stole trade secrets. He was trying to tank my business as revenge for not letting him buy in. Emily only found out because she overheard him bragging about it to a friend. I was furious. Frank was trying to destroy everything I'd worked for out of pure spite. All those years of emotional abuse came flooding back, along with a new determination not to let him win this time. I talked to my business partners and we agreed to take legal action. We're suing Frank for defamation and tortious interference. When word got out about the lawsuit, my extended family blew up my phone. They're saying I'm tearing the family apart and need to drop the suit. Even my Aunt Sarah, who was always kind to me, thinks I'm overreacting. Only Emily is on my side. I feel like I'm finally standing up for myself after years of Frank's abuse. But am I going too far by taking legal action? Should I try to handle this within the family instead? I don't want to hurt my relationships with other relatives, but I also can't let Frank get away with trying to ruin my life's work. Ida? Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and to say a lot has happened would be an understatement. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments. You helped me realize I wasn't overreacting and gave me the strength to follow through with the lawsuit. The day after I posted, Frank showed up at my office unannounced. I was in the middle of a meeting when my assistant buzzed me, saying there was a man insisting on seeing me immediately. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach, and sure enough, when I stepped out, there was Frank, red-faced and practically shaking with anger. He was livid about the lawsuit and demanded I drop it immediately. When I refused, he started yelling and making a scene in front of my employees. He called me ungrateful, accused me of betraying the family, and even threatened to expose some supposed dirt he had on me from my teenage years. I kept my cool, but inside I was a mess of emotions, anger, fear, and oddly, a bit of satisfaction at seeing Frank lose control like this. I had to call security to escort him out. As they were leading him away, he shouted that I'd regret this, that he'd make sure I lost everything. It was like a scene from a bad movie, and I half expected him to yell, "You'll rue the day," as the elevator doors closed. That night, Emily called me in tears again. Apparently, Frank had gone home and taken his anger out on her, accusing her of betraying the family by siding with me. He'd always been strict with Emily, but this time he crossed a line. He kicked her out of the house, telling her if she wanted to support me, she could go live with me. She had nowhere to go. I immediately offered to let her stay with me until she could find a new place. Having Emily around has been a mixed blessing. On one hand, it's been great to reconnect with her. We've spent late nights talking about our childhood, filling in gaps in each other's memories. She's helped me understand that a lot of what I perceived as indifference from the rest of the family was actually carefully orchestrated by Frank. He'd tell them I wanted to be left alone, that I was acting out and needed space. It's both heartbreaking and infuriating to realize how much he manipulated everyone. On the other hand, Emily's presence is a constant reminder of the family turmoil. She's struggling with guilt over cutting ties with her dad, even though she knows it's for the best. There are nights I hear her crying in the guest room, and I feel helpless. I want to comfort her, but I'm barely keeping it together myself. A week after Frank's office visit, our lawyer informed us that he had filed a countersuit against me for defamation. His claim? That by filing my lawsuit, I was damaging his reputation in the business community. It's completely baseless, but it's clear he's trying to drag this out and make it as painful as possible for me. The stress has definitely been taking its toll. I've had trouble sleeping, often lying awake rehashing old memories or worrying about the future. My work has suffered, I'm distracted in meetings, and I've had to delegate more tasks to my partners. They've been incredibly understanding, but I can't help feeling like I'm letting them down. Last weekend, my Aunt Sarah reached out and asked to meet for coffee. I was hesitant, but Emily encouraged me to go. We met at a quiet cafe near my apartment. Sarah looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes that matched my own. She spent most of the time trying to convince me to drop the lawsuit. She kept saying things like Frank's your family and he didn't mean any real harm. I lost my cool a bit and told her that Frank had never treated me like family. I reminded her of all the times he'd mistreated me growing up, and how he was now actively trying to destroy my livelihood. I told her about the Christmases where I got socks while my cousins got gaming consoles, about the times Frank forgot to pick me up from school activities, about the constant criticism and belittling. Sarah seemed shocked. I guess she'd never realized how bad things were between us. By the end of our talk, Sarah was in tears. She apologized for not protecting me more when I was younger and said she understood why I felt I had to go through with the lawsuit. While she still hopes we can find a way to resolve things outside of court, she promised not to pressure me about it anymore. The lawsuit is moving forward, albeit slowly. Our lawyer says these things can take time, but he's confident we have a strong case. Frank has tried to settle out of court twice now, but his offers have been insultingly low. It's clear he's not taking this seriously yet. I'm trying to stay positive, but some days are harder than others. The support from Emily and my business partners has been invaluable. Raj and Zoe have been picking up my slack at work without complaint, and they check in on me regularly. Emily has started therapy to deal with her own issues with Frank, and she's been encouraging me to do the same. There are moments when I question whether this is all worth it. Wouldn't it be easier to just give in, to try and smooth things over with Frank for the sake of family peace? But then I remember all the years of emotional abuse, the constant feeling of not being good enough, and now this attempt to destroy everything I've built. I know this is going to be a long, difficult process, but I'm committed to seeing it through. I can't let Frank win after everything he's done. Update 2. Another month has passed, and things have only gotten more complicated. The lawsuit is still ongoing, but there have been some unexpected developments in my personal life that have thrown me for a loop. About 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from a law firm representing my biological grandparents on my mother's side. I was shocked. I barely remembered them and hadn't had any contact since my parents died. The letter was formal but warm, expressing their desire to reconnect and explaining that they had been trying to find me for years. After discussing it with Emily and my therapist, yes, I finally started going. I decided to meet with the lawyers. They explained that my grandparents, Robert, 75M, and Linda, 73F, had been searching for me since my parents' death. Apparently, they had wanted to take me in after the accident, but Frank had convinced the courts he was a better guardian because he already had kids and could provide a stable family environment. What's more, Frank had been actively keeping them away all these years. He told them I wanted nothing to do with them, that I blamed them for not being there when my parents died. It was all lies, of course, but they had no way of knowing that. I met with my grandparents last week. It was an emotional reunion, to say the least. They looked older than I remembered, but their eyes were kind and full of love. They brought a box of mementos, photos of my mom as a child, letters they had written me over the years, birthday cards that were never sent. There was even documentation of a college fund they had set up for me, which Frank had somehow managed to keep hidden. As we talked, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. They told me stories about my mom that I'd never heard before, about her rebellious teenage years and how she'd eventually reconciled with them before meeting my dad. They spoke about the regret they felt for the initial disapproval of my parents' lifestyle, and how they'd been trying to make amends when the accident happened. Robert and Linda were furious when they learned about Frank's recent actions and the lawsuit. They've offered to help in any way they can, including financially if needed. It's strange but wonderful to suddenly have this support system I never knew existed. On the legal front, things are heating up. Our lawyer managed to get hold of some damning evidence, emails Frank sent to our clients full of blatant lies about our company. We also have sworn statements from 2 clients saying Frank directly told them to drop our contracts or face consequences in their own businesses. Turns out Frank has some shady connections he uses to throw his weight around. With this new evidence, Frank's lawyer reached out about settling again. This time, the offer was much more reasonable, but still not enough to cover the damage he's done. We're considering it, but part of me wants to see this through to the end and have Frank face real consequences for once in his life. The family is still divided. Some relatives have come around after learning the full story, while others are doubling down on supporting Frank. Emily is still staying with me and has officially cut ties with her dad. It's been hard for her, but she says she feels free for the first time in her life. I'm feeling more confident than ever that we're going to win this, but I know the road ahead is still long. The support from my grandparents and Emily has been a lifeline. For the first time, I feel like I have real family in my corner. Update 3, it's been 6 months since my last update, and I'm relieved to say this saga has finally come to an end. After presenting our evidence in court, Frank's lawyer approached us with a final settlement offer. It was substantial, enough to cover all the losses our company suffered, plus a significant amount for damages. After discussing it with my partners and our lawyer, we decided to accept. As part of the settlement, Frank had to sign a non-disclosure agreement and make a public statement retracting his claims about our company. He's also barred from any future attempts to interfere with our business. It feels surreal to have it all over, and I'm still processing my emotions about the outcome. The day after we signed the settlement, Emily heard from her mom that Frank had been admitted to the hospital for severe stress and anxiety. Apparently, he'd had some kind of breakdown. Part of me felt a twinge of guilt, wondering if I'd pushed too hard. But then I reminded myself that this was the consequence of his own actions. Years of manipulating and bullying others had finally caught up with him. I've been grappling with mixed emotions about the whole situation. On one hand, there's relief that it's over and satisfaction that Frank finally faced consequences for his actions. On the other hand, there's a lingering sadness for what could have been if things had been different. I find myself wondering what kind of relationship we might have had if Frank had been able to accept me as I was, rather than trying to mold me into something I'm not. On a happier note, my relationship with my grandparents has blossomed. Robert and Linda have become a big part of my life, and we're making up for lost time. They've been eager to share stories about my mom, filling in gaps in my memories and helping me understand her better. It's bittersweet. I love learning more about her, but it also highlights how much I missed out on. Robert has even started mentoring me in business, sharing wisdom from his years as a successful entrepreneur. He's become the father figure I never had, offering guidance without the constant criticism I got from Frank. Linda, meanwhile, has taken on a nurturing role, always ready with a home-cooked meal or a listening ear when things get tough. Emily has fully settled into her new life away from Frank's influence. She's back in school, pursuing the degree she always wanted but Frank discouraged. It's been amazing to see her come out of her shell and discover who she is without her father's overbearing presence. Seeing her flourish has been one of the best parts of this whole experience. My company has rebounded well from the turmoil. We've regained most of the clients we lost and even landed some new big contracts. The publicity from the lawsuit, while stressful at the time, ended up raising our profile in the industry. We've had to be careful about how we discuss the situation, given the NDA, but it seems like standing up to Frank's bullying tactics has earned us some respect in business circles. As for the rest of the family, things are still complicated. Some have come around and apologized for not believing me initially. My Aunt Sarah, in particular, has been making efforts to rebuild our relationship. She's been spending time with Emily and me, and slowly, we're forming a new kind of family dynamic. Others are still loyal to Frank and have cut ties with me. It hurts, especially when it comes to cousins I was once close to. But I'm trying to focus on the positive relationships in my life now, rather than dwelling on those I've lost. I've continued with therapy, working through the complex emotions this whole ordeal has stirred up. It's been helpful in processing not just the recent events, but also the years of emotional abuse I endured growing up. I'm learning to recognize and challenge the negative self-talk that Frank instilled in me, and slowly, I'm building a healthier sense of self-worth. Looking back, I don't regret taking legal action. It was a difficult and stressful process, but it forced the truth to come out and allowed me to stand up for myself. I've gained real family, lost toxic influences, and come out stronger on the other side. There are still days when I struggle, when the weight of everything that's happened hits me hard. But overall, I feel like I'm on a positive path forward. I'm learning to trust myself and my decisions, something that was hard to do after years of having my judgment questioned and undermined. For anyone facing a similar situation, I would say don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, even against family. It's not easy, and it may get messy, but sometimes it's necessary to break free from toxic cycles and build the life you deserve. Seek support where you can find it, be it friends, therapy, or online communities like this one. And remember, you're not alone in dealing with family issues, no matter how unique or overwhelming they may feel. As for me, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. I have a thriving business, supportive grandparents, a stronger relationship with Emily, and a better understanding of myself. It's not the family I was born into, but it's the family I've chosen and built for myself. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see what the future holds.